Welcome to part 10 of this biplane tutorial series where we're creating this Boeing-Stearman Model 75. If you haven't seen the previous parts, definitely check out the tutorial playlist linked in the video description. So in this part, we're going to be creating the materials for the wings, the wing struts, and also the cables and connectors. Now before we start this part, I wanted to let you know about my Ultimate Blender Procedural Material Pack, which comes with all of my procedural materials, and they're all pre-set up in Blender's asset browser with custom thumbnails, sorted catalogs, and customizable node groups. So if you purchase and install my Ultimate Material Pack as an asset library into Blender, then you can just drag and drop all the procedural materials into your 3D projects to quickly add materials to your 3D scenes. If you're interested in purchasing my Ultimate Material Pack, then you can check out the product pages linked in the video description and also the product trailer video linked in the description. So what I'm going to do here is hold down the control key in the outliner and I'll control click on the eye, and that'll unhide everything. Then let's just control click on the wings on the eye there just to preview the wings, and then shift and click on the wings, cables, and struts. So let's go into the rendered view, and the first thing that I want to do is select this object here. So if we go here to the material, and I believe I forgot to rename that material, so it is this material here. Let's rename this material to anti-slit pad. And what I'm going to do is shift and select the eye there, click on the eye to unhide the body, and if I select that, yeah, that's the correct material. So make sure these are both the anti-slit pad material. Let's just hold down the shift key and click on the eye there to hide the body. So now I want to create another material, which is going to be kind of a little metal piece along the anti-slip pad. Firstly though, I want to hide the grid because it's pretty annoying in the way. So I'm going to click on the overlays and I'll hide the floor and the grid axes. So let's go into edit mode. I'll go to the face select. I will select this face here, that loop of faces, and then I'll also select that loop of faces right there. Let's click on the plus here to add a new material. Let's click on new, and I'll rename this material to anti-slip pad metal. And for this base color here, I'm just going to make it kind of this bright gray color. Here's the hex value if you want to punch in the same color. Let's turn the metallic all the way up to 1 so it's kind of shiny, and we'll click on the assign button. So now you can see we just have that little bit of shiny metal there on the edge. So let's hide this object because we've added the materials for it. Let's now add the blue paint to these struts here. So if we select the struts, let's add the blue paint. Let's now go into edit mode, and I'm just going to select the struts. Then I'll hit Control I to invert the selection so we have the bolts selected. So let's add a new material. Let's click on new and we'll click on assign. And then this material I'm going to call bolts. And for the base color, I'm just going to make it kind of this mid-gray color. And then I'll also turn the metallic value all the way up to 1. And I'll turn the roughness down to a 0.4. Now over here on this side, I need to deselect everything. And we just need to select those struts there. Click on the blue paint and then assign that. So now those have the blue paint as well. So let's just hide those objects. Let's now create the cables material. So I'm going to select the cables. Let's click on new, and I can just call this material cables. And for this material, I'm going to go with kind of this grayish brownish color. Here's the hex value if you want to punch in the same color, and I'll leave all the other settings how they are. So I'll just hide that object because we added the materials to it. Let's now select the cables here, or the cable connectors. We'll click on new, and I'm just going to rename this material to cable connectors. Let's turn the metallic value all the way up to 1. I'll turn the roughness to a 0.6, so it's a metal color. I'll turn the roughness to 0.6, so now it looks like metal. And then for the base color, I'm just going to use this kind of mid-gray color, just like that. So now I have just a little bit of a shiny metal. So I'll hide those objects. Now let's save the project again. Let's select this cylinder here, which was connecting the cables. Let's click on new, and I'll rename this to wing cable support. And this material is going to be pretty simple. I'm just going to make it like this gray color, and then I'll leave the other settings how they are. Now, if you go into edit mode, you can see there are some different little bolts here. So if I just select that cylinder, hit Control I to invert the selection, let's click on the plus here to add a new material in the material slot. We're going to choose the bolts, so select the bolts, and then click in the assign button. So we'll hide that object. Let's go up here to the top, and we're going to select this little cap piece. We'll add a new material to the cap, and we'll just rename this material to wing cap. And this is going to be a pretty simple material. I'm just going to make the base color a pretty dark color, and then I'll leave all the other settings how they are. So I can hide that object. Let's select this little piece right here. Let's click on new to add a new material. And this material is going to be the yellow paint. So we'll call this yellow paint. And we're going to be adding this yellow paint material to a lot of the different objects. This is going to be basically like a base color or a base material for the other objects. So let's actually shift select all the other objects. Then lastly, select that little long piece. We'll use Control L and we are going to link the materials. So they all have the yellow paint material. So let's go to the shading workspace and I'll zoom out here and I'm going to create a basic material for the yellow paint. So let's add a noise texture. We'll use Control T and we're going to use the object coordinates. So let's change some of the settings of the noise texture. So I'll turn the scale to a 23. I'll turn the detail all the way up to 10. Let's turn the roughness all the way up to 1. So it's very detailed now. So let's now add a mix color to create some custom colors. So I'll put the mix color right there. I'll put the factor into the factor of the mix. So for color A, this is going to be the base yellow color. And here's the hex value if you want to punch in the same color. But then why I'm using this noise texture is to just add a little bit of grunge and dirt and just to make it look a little bit dirty. And so color B is going to be the dirt color. And it's just going to be this light brown color. And here's the hex value if you want to punch in the same color. So let's now put the result into the base color and we'll preview the principled shader and I'll turn the roughness down to a 0.2 so it's much more shiny. So we can now select that little thin piece and just hide that. So now what we want to do is we want to select the top wing and we want to duplicate this material so that it is a separate material, but it's still using the same data. And now we're going to rename this to top wing. Now, if you look at real photos of this airplane, they usually have these little lines which are going back and forth along the airplane wing. So I'm going to add a wave texture, drop it down here, and I'll preview the wave texture. And I'll hit Control T, and I'll use the object coordinates. And I'll change some of the wave settings. So on the scale here, I'll turn it to a 0.8. But I'm going to leave the other settings how they are. So now I want to take the wave texture and I want to put it into the normal to give it some bump. Let's preview the principled shader. And then to convert it to bump data, we need to add a bump node. And we're going to put the bump node in between the wave and the principled shader. And the wave color needs to be going into the height value. So now you can see it looks really bumpy, but it's way too strong. So let's turn the strength down to a 0.15. Now there's still a problem with this, and that is that it looks like it's going up a lot and then going back down and up and down, but I want to make this a lot smaller and more soft. So what I'm going to do is drag the wave back here, and then I'm going to search for the RGB curves. And I'll put this right here after the wave. So now I'm going to use these curves here to basically make the shape of those waves. So I'll click here in the center to add a dot there, and then I'll take this dot in the corner and drag it all the way down. Then I'll drag this dot way down right here, so it's a lot more subtle. And then I'll click to add a dot there and click to add a dot there, so we have two on either side. And I'll drag these dots all the way to the very bottom. And then I'll take this dot and just drag it way down, so it's very subtle. So now you can see it's pretty much flat most of it, but then just here in the very center there, it's going to be a lot more sharp. So now we get that nice texture there of those little bumps going back and forth. And I think it might be even a little bit too strong, so let's turn the bump strength just like a 0.1. That looks a little bit better. So let's just box select all these nodes. We'll join them into a frame and add a label, and I can just call this waves. Let's also put the bump node here inside the waves group. So now what I want to do is create that star logo. So if you purchase the tutorial project files or the resource pack, then you'll already get the texture with the star logo. But if you want to create it yourself, I'll show you how to make it. So let's open up a new Blender file. So in a new scene in Blender, we're going to delete the lamp and the cube. Let's go to top view and we'll bring the camera to the top. Now I want to make this a square image. So here on the resolution, I'm going to make it 2560 by 2560. Also here in the world, let's delete the world so it's fully black. And then I want to create a star. So to create a star, we are going to search for a circle. And on the add circle settings, we'll turn the vertices to 10. We'll close the settings. And in edit mode, we're going to scale it way up. And then what we're going to do is select these two. We're going to skip one and select this one, skip this one, select the bottom one, skip this one, and select this one. And we're going to scale it down. So we'll select everything and fill a face there. And then you can select the center vertices and scale it if you want to. I'll scale it down and kind of move it there into the center. So move it along the y-axis. Now let's add a new object. We're going to add a circle. And this circle, I'm going to set the vertices to like 100, so it's very detailed. And then in edit mode, we're going to scale this up and just place it right there. And we're going to fill a face. And then let's bring it down on the z-axis so it's farther down. Let's also select the camera. And if we go to the object data properties of the camera, we'll change the type from perspective to orthographic. And then we need to drag the orthographic scale and just drag that back. So now the camera is looking much more flat on the objects. So I can now scale this up and scale this up as well. Now I want to duplicate this, so we'll duplicate the circle and bring it up, and I'm going to scale it way down. And if we go to top view or go into the camera view, we'll just scale this down so we have a circle inside the star. Let's go into the rendered viewport mode and let's add some materials. So let's go to the materials, we'll click on new. We're going to make this an emission, and then this is just going to be a nice bright red. Let's now click on the star, we'll add a new material. This is going to be an emission as well, and it's going to be fully white. Then we'll click on this blue background or the background circle. We'll click on new, and this one is going to be an emission as well, and it's going to be a very dark blue color. So if you want to use the same hex values for this blue color, here is the hex code. You can punch that in. Then the white here, that's just going to be fully white. And then the red one here, this is the hex value that I'll be using for the red color. Let's also make the background transparent. So if we go here to the render properties, we'll go here to the film tab and checkmark the transparent button. So that way it'll have an alpha transparency. And also let's open up the color management, and we're going to change the view transform to standard. Let's save this Blender file. So we'll click on file and save. We're going to go into this texture files folder, and we're going to rename this to star logo and just save that Blender file. We'll save the project, and then let's go to the sampling. I'll use 100 samples and use the denoise so it looks nice and crisp. And then we'll save the project and give it a render. And it should render pretty fast. So now let's save the image. So I'll click on image and save the image. And I'll rename that to star logo, and make sure you're saving it as a PNG with RGBA so it stores the alpha transparency, and I'll save that image. So we can save and close this file. So back in our original project, let's go to the add menu. We're going to search for an image texture, and then let's open the image texture. Let's go to our folder with the textures, and we're going to add the star logo. So what I'm going to do is select these nodes here, and we're going to delete them, but we're still going to use this mix. So let's take the star logo color, and we're going to put that into color B. Let's just preview the mix to see what it looks like. And then we want to take the alpha, which is going to have the black and white values, and we'll put the alpha into the factor. So this way the alpha is going to tell it what part is going to be color A, which is kind of the yellow, and then what part is going to be color B, which is the base color of the texture. Now you can't actually see the texture, so we need to UV unwrap it. So we'll go to top view, we'll go into edit mode, and we're going to select everything, and we're going to hit U, and we're going to do unwrap, and we're going to do the project from view. And now you can see the star logo. Let's go over here to the UV editing workspace, and I'll navigate up here so I can see it. Let's close the side panel here, and if I select everything in the UV editor, let's just scale this way up. And let's go back to the shading workspace. Now you can see the texture is repeating, so we'll change this repeat to clip instead, so there's just one of them. This is the base color, that's going into color B. Then the alpha is just the black and white mask for where it's going to be the yellow and where it's going to be the logo, so that's going into the factor. So now we just have placed the logo on top of the yellow. So let's just preview the principled shader again, and let's box select these nodes, join them into a frame. We'll add a label, and I'll call this star logo. So let's go back here to the UV editing because I want to move around the star. So we'll go to top view, I want to select everything, and I want to rotate it by 180 degrees so the star is pointed forwards instead. Let's navigate over here to the other side so it's not upside down, and then we'll just scale this down and bring it over here, and right about there should be just fine. Let's go back to the shading workspace, and we'll save the project again, and because we are using the mirror modifier, it mirrored it over to the other side. Now if you go to the bottom of the top wing, you can see the star down here, but I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is box select all the faces where you can see the star. So let's go to the UV editing workspace, and we're just going to move the selection right over there, and now the star is disappeared there in the bottom. So we'll go back to the shading workspace. So I now want to create another group of nodes up here, and this is going to have dirt with a gradient, because what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that there is more dirt on the front and less dirt on the back to kind of look like little bits of dirt kind of built up on the front because the plane was flying forward. So to do this, we are going to search for a noise texture. Let's preview the noise texture, and we'll use Control T, and we're going to use the object coordinates so it's not stretched. Now let's change the noise settings. So I'll turn the scale to 12, and I'll turn the detail to 10, and I'll turn the roughness all the way up to 1. So this is kind of just that basic texture there with the little subtle dirt. Now what I also want to do is search for a gradient texture. We'll drop this here underneath the noise, and we're going to plug the mapping vector into the vector of the gradient. Now let's preview the gradient, and I want to rotate the gradient and scale it. So let's take this mapping value and we can rotate the gradient. So we're going to take the Z value, and if we rotate this, you can see if I turn this to like a 90, it's going to rotate the gradient over so it's white on this side and then black on the back. And we are going to scale it later, but I want to show you why we're scaling it. So we're going to do that later once we set this node setup. So what I want to do is mix the noise with the gradient. So to do this, we're going to search for the mix color. We'll put the mix color right here, and we can take the factor, and we're going to put that into color A, and then we're going to take the gradient color, and we're going to put that into color B. And let's just preview the mix. So now you can see we're kind of blending between the gradient and the noise. Now let's take the mix type here, and we're going to change this to linear light. This way, if I drag the factor, you can see if it's at 1, it's more blended, and so now you can see the gradient, but the gradient is being distorted by the noise. Or if I turn the factor way down, it's pretty much just the noise. So I'm going to turn the factor to a 0.55, and all that noise there just makes the gradient look a bit more random and dirty. Now I do want to scale this because the gradient is too small and sharp. So on the scale values here, let's turn the scale values to 0.3 on all of them, and that way the gradient is a lot bigger. So I like how that looks a lot better. So the dirt is kind of chunky and more random. So let's box select these nodes, and we'll join it together into a frame, and we'll add a label, and I'll call this dirt gradient. Now we're going to be mixing this into the base color, but I do want to change the colors a little bit. So we're going to search for a color ramp. We'll put this right here after the linear light and put it inside the dirt gradient. And then let's change some of the colors. So on this white tab here, I'm going to make this kind of like a light gray color, and the hex value is 6Cs. So just kind of a light gray color. And then I want to drag this over just to make it a little bit stronger so it's a bit more visible. So now what we can do is mix this into the base color. So to mix it in, we are going to add a mix color. And we can drop this right down here after the star logo. Now the star logo, the result is going to go into color A, and then we can take this color ramp from the dirt gradient, and we're going to put that into the factor. So let's now preview the mix. So now color B, this is going to be the color of the dirt. So for the color of the dirt, I'm going to make it a light brown color, and here's the hex value if you want to punch in the same color I'm using, but it's just going to be a light brown color. So now you can see it is pretty subtle, but I do want it to be pretty subtle, but just there on the front of the wing there, it just looks a little bit more dirty. And if you want to make it more strong or less strong, you can drag this around, so drag the color ramp. So if you want to see more of the dirt, you can turn that up, or drag it back if you want it to be more subtle. So I now want to add some more larger, more blobby noise, and we're going to mix that in as well to just add a bit more dirt over the wings. So let's search for another noise texture, and we'll put it up here, and we'll hit Control T, and we're going to use the object coordinates. Let's preview the noise texture, and we can change some of the settings. So I'll turn the scale to a 2.5, and then I'll leave the other settings how they are. Now I do want to distort them a little bit with the gradient, so we are going to search for the mix color to mix it together. So drop the mix color right here after the noise, and then we're going to take the gradient color, and we're going to put that into color A. Then we're going to take the noise texture factor, and we're going to put that into color B. So now if I drag this mix here, we're blending between using the gradient or using the blobby noise. Now on the mix type here, let's change it to linear light. And now when I drag this around, you can see it's going to kind of distort that gradient texture. So it looks like the noise is distorting the gradient. And then I'll turn the factor to a 0.2. So now you can see it's lighter over here and then dark over there. So wherever the light parts are, that is where the dirt is going to be. So there's just going to be a bit more pieces of dirt. So let's box select these nodes. Let's join it together into a frame. Let's add a label to this. And I'm going to call this larger dirt. Now let's also add a color ramp so I can change the colors a bit. So we'll add a color ramp, drop it right here, and I'll put it inside the larger dirt frame. And then I'll take the white color and I'll drag it over so it's more sharp. And then I'm going to make it a bit more of a light gray color. And if you want to punch in the same hex code, you can punch it in right there. It's just going to be kind of this lighter gray color. So now what we want to do is mix this into the base color. So we'll take this mix, we'll duplicate it, and we're going to drop it right here. And we're going to take this color ramp from the larger dirt, and we're going to put that into the factor. Let's now preview the mix. And then for the dirt, it's going to be this same brown color. So we're just going to use the same brown color that we used before. So now you can see here it is before, it's just more subtle, and then here it is after. So you can see we're just adding a bit more blobs of dirt there, and a little bit of dirt over there on that side. So that's going to add more detail to the model. So let's preview the principled shader again. You can definitely see little bits of dirt there on the wing. Now I do just want to add a little bit more subtler over the entire texture. So let's drag the principled shader back, and we're going to duplicate this mix one more time and stick it right here. I'm now going to take this noise texture and we're going to take the factor, and I'm going to put that into the factor of this third mix right here. So now you can see here it is at the beginning, then we add that layer of dirt, and then we're adding another layer of dirt. Now I do want to change the colors for this, so we're going to search for a color ramp. We'll drop it right here between the mix and that noise, so drop it there, and I can just drag this up here so we have a bit more space, and I'm going to drop this color ramp right here in the dirt gradient. So just drop it right there. So now I can change the color ramp colors to make it more contrasted or less contrasted, to make it more and less visible. So I'm just going to drag the black tab over a little bit to make it a bit less visible. You can see if I drag the black tab over, it's more and more invisible. So I'll just put it kind of about there so it's more subtle, but there's just a little bit of dirt over the entire wing. So we can just now preview the principled shader again. So we now have 3 different textures which we're all mixing together to add dirt to the wing. So now I want to take this dirt gradient, I want to take this color ramp right here, and I want to put this into the bump just so that there's a very subtle bump there to look like there's just a little bit of bumpiness on the dirt. So let's take this color ramp here, the bottom color ramp in the dirt gradient, and we want to put this into the normal. So what we're going to do is search for another bump node, drop it right here after the first bump, and then the color ramp color can go into the height value. So this way you can see we're mixing 2 bump maps together. But let's make this bump strength very subtle, so let's just turn it to a 0.05. So it is very subtle, but if you look closely, the dirt is just going to have a little bit of bump. So let's preview the principled shader. It is pretty subtle, but there is just a little bit of bumpiness where the dirt is. So let's save the project, and that is going to be it for the top wing material. Now for the ailerons on the bottom of the wings, these are just going to have the yellow paint material. So I'll just hide these objects so we can just remember that we already added a material to them. So now I want to duplicate this material and put it onto the bottom wings because we're going to have the same node set up, but then we're also going to add some words or some letters on the very bottom of the bottom wings. So what we're going to do is select the bottom wings, and let's go to the materials. And instead of the yellow paint, we want to search for wings. We're going to add the top wing material, but then we're going to duplicate the material and we're going to call it bottom wing instead. So we have bottom wing. Let's select the top wing and just hide it. So now the bottom wing is a separate material. Also, let's click right up here on the viewport overlays, and I'm going to hide the floor just because I really don't like it. It's kind of annoying in the way. Now we're going to have 2 different textures. One of them is going to be the star logo, and the other one is going to be the words on the bottom of the wings. And so because I'm going to have 2 different textures, they're going to use 2 different UV maps. So I'm going to search for the UV map node, and we'll drop it here in the star logo, and I'll just select the default UV map and I'll put that into the vector. So we're just ensuring that it's using the correct UV map. So let's now hit Control-7 to go to bottom view. We'll go into edit mode, and I'll hit U, and I'm just going to unwrap project from view. So now let's go over here to the UV editing, and we'll hit Control-7 to go to bottom view. And if I select everything, we're just going to scale it up and just make that star logo really small and just put it right there at the very end. Now, if we navigate up here to the top, you can see it's also at the top there, but I don't want it to be at the top. I only want to be able to see it on the bottom of the wing. So we're going to box select all of these faces, just box select all the faces that are on the top where you can see the star. And then we're going to move these faces right up here so you can't see the star on the top, but you can still see it right down there on the bottom. So let's save the project again, and we'll go back to the shading workspace. So what I now want to do is open up a new Blender file, and we're going to create the words on the bottom of the wing. So in a new scene in Blender, I'm just going to bring my view to the top, and I'll bring the 3D cursor to the top, and I'm going to select both of these objects and delete them. And let's just add a camera boundary to the camera, and let's go to the add menu, and we are going to add text. And I'll scale the text up, and let's add the same font to the text. So we'll go to the object data properties, open up the font, and choose a font. And we're going to use the same font that we used before from 1001fonts.com, the Gunplay Regular. So let's just open up the font, and let's scale it up a little bit. And then we just want to go into edit mode, and we can just type the font. So I'm going to type U.S. and then we'll add a bunch of spaces here. And then I'm going to type Army, and I'm going to make it all capitalized. Let's just bring this over, and then you can see it almost looks a little bit squished because of the kind of the style of the font. So I'm just going to scale it up slightly on the y-axis just so it's a bit larger, and then I can kind of scale this down. Let's just stick it right there. Then if we select the camera, we'll go to the output properties, and let's just drag the X and Y resolution just so it's a bit longer, and then scale the US Army font way down there. Now to make sure that this font is very high resolution, let's turn the percentage here to like 300 so that it's very high resolution. Now let's also go into the rendered view, and I want to delete the world, so we'll delete the background world so it's not adding any light. Let's also go to the render properties, and on the color management, we're going to change the view transform to standard and the look to none so it doesn't mess up the colors. Then on the film tab, we'll check mark the transparent button. And then we're going to add a new material. We're going to change it to an emission and just make sure that the emission color is fully black. So now let's save the file. So I'll click on File and Save. And I'm just going to call this usarmy.blend and just save that. So we can now save this, and let's just make sure we add some sampling. Let's turn it to 100 samples and turn on the denoise, and then we'll just hit F12 to render that image. So once it's finished rendering, you can just click on Image and then save the image. And we'll just save this as usarmy.png and then make sure it's set to RGBA so it stores the alpha transparency, and we'll just save that image. So we can just save and close the file. So back in our original project, let's just go to the add menu, and we're going to search for an image texture, and let's now open up the texture. So let's select the US Army font and just open that image. So let's now drag the waves down right here, and I'm going to drag the US Army right over here. And then let's also add a UV map node. We're going to drop the UV map down here, and we'll put the UV into the vector of the US Army logo. So now what I want to do is create a separate UV map to UV unwrap the US Army logo. So let's go to the side panel. We're going to go here to the object data properties. We'll click on the plus here to add a new UV map, and I'll call this US Army. So now let's preview this so we can see it. And if we click on the UV map drop down, we're going to choose the US Army. So we'll be able to see this now, and it will be using the separate UV map, so it won't mess up the first UV map. Let's hit Control-7 to go to bottom view, and if we go into edit mode, we want to select everything, and let's go over here to the UV editing, and also go to bottom view. Now if we scroll right over here, we want to make sure we're previewing the US Army UV map. Now before we UV unwrap this, we do need to apply the mirror modifier, because I want the US to be on this side, and the Army to be on this side. So in object mode, let's just apply the mirror modifier. So now it's all geometry. So with everything selected, on bottom view, we'll hit U, and we're going to unwrap project from view. So now we'll select the UV islands, and we're going to scale the UV islands up, just like that. All right, so put it right there. Now we still can't see the US Army font. That's because we need to add it into the base color. So we'll go over here to the shading workspace. So what we're going to do is select this mix, and we'll duplicate it, and we'll drop the mix color here, and we'll press Alt-P to bring it out of the frame, and let's just stick it here after this mix. So we're going to take the alpha is a black and white color, so we can put the alpha into the factor to tell it where it's going to be. Then we're going to take color B, and we're going to make that fully black, because that is going to be the color of the logo. So if we preview the mix here, you can now see we're mixing them both together. So if I go to the top here, you can see there's the star logo with the yellow, and then we're mixing the US Army font on top of it. Now let's make this bigger, the side panel bigger, and I don't want the US Army font to be on the top. So if we just go to top view and deselect everything, we can just box select the entire top. Now when we do that, it's still going to select some parts on the bottom, and that is because we had this part right here which was selected. So we'll use the B for the box select, click and drag with the middle mouse wheel, and we're just going to deselect those faces there, and then also deselect all those faces there. So now just the top is selected but not the bottom. So if we go to the UV editing workspace, we'll select the UVs and we'll just move it up there. So to fix the texture from repeating itself, let's go back to the shading workspace, and we can go to the US Army font, and we'll take the repeat here and we'll change it to clip. So now you can't see it on the top, but you can still see it down here on the bottom. Now it looks like we messed something up right here. If we go into edit mode, we need to select these faces right here, because for some reason these faces were not selected. So make sure you select those faces, go to UV editing, and we just want to drag these faces right up here. So now on the top, it's fully white. We also need to do the same thing for this side, drag that up there. So now the top of the wings are just that yellow color, but if I go right down here to the bottom, we now have the bottom with the US Army logo. So back in edit mode, I'm going to select everything, and let's just select everything here in the UV islands, and let's just drag the US Army font around so it's placed where we want it. So I think I will scale the font so it's slightly smaller. So to scale the UV islands down a little bit, and then let's put the US right about there. Then if we deselect everything and hit the L key just to select that island there, let's just drag that over just like that. So let's now go back here to the shading workspace, and we can select both of these nodes here, the UV map and the US Army. Let's join it together into a frame. We'll add a label, and I can just call it US Army font. So US Army font. So now let's Control Shift select the principal shader, and we can look down here on the bottom, and there we go. We now have the US Army font. So let's now go back to the layout, and we'll press Alt H to unhide everything. And let's go back to solid view, and let's open up the outliner, and we can now use the Control key and click there just to show the wings and then show everything again. And we'll go up into the rendered view and kind of see how that's looking so far. Now, if you want to, you could also add the US Army font somewhere like on the body or somewhere else. When looking at reference images of the Boeing-Stearman Model 75, some of these Boeing-Stearman 75 do have the US Army on this side. This specific paint job usually just has the US Army on the bottom, so I'm just gonna keep the US Army logo on the bottom but not on the body. So let's just save the project again, and this is gonna finish it up for this part of the tutorial series. So thank you so much for watching. So in the next part, we're going to be creating the materials for the tail and also the materials for the wheels. So when the next part is released, I'll have it linked in the video description, and it will also be right up there on the end screen. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next part.